We will be discussing the future of maritime mobility and how oceans and ports are driving cleaner and smarter transport. Please help me welcome on stage Christian Thiel, co-founder of Turquois X.
Thank you very much. Welcome to our session, which is really combining two worlds, which are usually discussed separately, but are essentially inseparable: maritime mobility and urban mobility. Approximately 40% of the world's population live within 100 kilometers of the coast. Most of our fastest growing and largest cities are coastal or river hubs. How ships move, how ports operate, and how goods float through these maritime gateways in many ways shape congestion, connectivity, and the quality of air that we breathe in urban environments. If the ocean economy would be a country, it would be the 5th largest country in the world. As we speak, there are around 55,000 large merchant ships at sea, transporting over 80% of globally traded goods. But most importantly, the oceans are our life support system. They regulate the climate, they absorb excess heat, and generate more than 50% of the world's oxygen. On a personal note, I was fortunate enough to spend almost 4 years at the Red Sea coast, and if you've seen and experienced this vulnerable ecosystem, you know the responsibility that we have to preserve this beauty and really to occupy and safeguard this environment. At this time, the maritime sector undergoes rapid transformation. First and foremost, we're witnessing unprecedented growth. The ocean economy is envisaged to grow from today $1.5 trillion to $3 trillion by 2030. There's a strong drive for decarbonization, electrification, accelerated by investor demand and, above all, regulation. And there's a huge surge in innovation and capital inflow to digitalize ports, to build new vessel types, and into green fuels for maritime shipping. It's still small if you see it in the size of the overall sector, but it's growing rapidly. To give you an idea, around 90% of overall VC, venture capital money that has flown into the sector has been getting in since 2019. So only over the last 6 years, 90% of the overall VC capital invested in the sector. These shifts make ports more than just infrastructure. They make ports innovation engines, central nodes connecting maritime mobility to hinterland transport and urban systems. To explore where this is going, I'm joined by two exceptional leaders who will shine light on some of the questions that I've outlined already. To my left is Marco van der Sanden. He's founding partner and CEO of MarineFifty. You bring to the table the investor and system view, how to bring real money to real projects in ports to decarbonize the maritime sector. And further to my left, we have Shadi Abdallah, who is the regional director for Middle East at REGENT Sea Gliders. It's a novel next generation zero emissions watercraft on the intersection of aviation and maritime and shipping. Can we just show a quick video so that everybody knows what we're talking about when mentioning sea gliders? Yeah.
We're REGENT, and we're building all-electric sea gliders for fast, safe coastal transportation with zero emissions. The quarter-scale sea glider prototype really where we earned our stripes, where we demonstrated that we can float, foil, and fly, and validated that we were ready to go to full scale. We proved out all the systems on the sea glider. We proved that our team of aerospace engineers and boat builders could work together And we proved out our advanced software and control systems to keep this vehicle safe in all conditions. We used everything we learned to inform this simulator, which of course then informs training and design of our full-scale Viceroy prototype. When we showed people our quarter-scale prototype, I don't think they realized how big the full-scale Viceroy really is. What's important to remember is that quarter scale is just one direction, so it's 4 times wider, but it's also 4 times longer. It's 4 times taller, and so the full scale with a 65-foot wingspan weighing in at 15,000 pounds will be the largest electric vehicle to ever fly.
That is quite something. So what is the usual reaction you get when people see the Sea Glider for the first time?
Yeah, so we had a full-scale mock-up at the Dubai Air Show a couple of weeks ago, and people come up to it and they're just surprised how big it is. Because when we've shown videos to many people and they think it's very, very small, but it has a really wide wingspan. It's about 20-meter wingspan, and it requires that to be able to get out of the water and fly in ground effect, which is about 10 meters above the water. And yeah, they're wowed by it, and then when they go inside of it, they're very surprised that it can carry 12 passengers. Because a lot of times electric vehicles are kind of limited on payload and range. And one of the big advantages of the Sea Glider is that you can carry 12 people, 1,600 kg of payload, and you could do about 300 kilometers of range.
And the full scale is already in the water, or is it just on a similar stage right now?
Yeah, so the full scale is right now, we're based in Rhode Island, so just south of Boston. And the full-scale prototype is now going through its testing. We've tested the float mode, we've tested the hydrofoil mode, and we're just about to do our first flight in the coming months. That's a big milestone for us.
Fantastic. So then it's floating, falling, and flying.
That's correct.
So adding 2 more dimensions to the human dream of flying in a way.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Marco, what, from your point of view, are the most exciting developments right now in the maritime mobility and logistics sector?
I would say the most interesting part, in one word, would be actual deployment. Things are happening on the ground. It's been a long time. I think people talked about aspirations, ambitions, projects, scaling, but I think it's happening as we speak in a grand way, and that's good. That's needed. We are an investment firm, basically, that looks after the maritime sector at large to get it to net zero. There is still a lot of technology development needed. So we're also appreciative of the fact that, which also excites me, that there's a lot of interest in actually spending money on really testing and pioneering with those devices, directions we're going, and technologies, basically. So in one word, it's happening.
That's very positive. What gets you out of bed, Shadi, in the morning with regard to maritime mobility and logistics?
So I have to say that I spent about 20 years in aviation, and just getting into the maritime space is very interesting. Our Sea Glider, even though it flies, it's actually considered a vessel. It's under the Maritime regulator, and so we follow maritime law, maritime rules, and so it's really new to me, the whole maritime space. But what I'm seeing a lot that's really exciting in the maritime space is the autonomy. So we have a partner, we're partnered with ADNOC to do some of their offshore energy logistics. And so they kind of share with us some of the things that they're working on too as well. And they announced recently that they're doing some unmanned vessels that they're testing now. We have a company actually in Rhode Island that's next to us that's also doing small unmanned vessel, almost like drones for military use. And so autonomy is there. When you look at ports, there's a lot of autonomy using drones as well. So, I think that's going to be a big component in the future of maritime, is just a lot of autonomy.
And it's great to see, in a way, you yourself moving from aviation to maritime shows that this sector is attracting really good talent at the right time right now. So your personal story, I think, is also worth mentioning there.
Yeah, I mean, what's really interesting is that in terms of startups, technology startups, you didn't really hear too much about maritime-based, physical world startups. A lot of software, but actual hardware, you didn't really hear much about it. The last 5 years, there's a lot going on in the hardware maritime space, so it's very exciting.
Marco, ports are under a lot of pressure to decarbonize. How can they do so quickly?
Yeah. Yeah, so ports and infrastructure, I would say at large, are critical elements in the value chain of maritime, whether it's the seagoing, larger vessels, whether it's inland shipping or coastal shipping, equally relevant. I think the ports are, I mean, the first things to be done are all related to electrification. So when you have renewable power, apply it directly, I would say, is the most important part. Examples, cruise ships, big vessels, they burn a lot of energy, let's say, or use a lot of energy when they're actually docked at the ports. So that's the kind of first things I would immediately focus on, i.e. that means infrastructure needs to be there. So cables, electricity to be organized for. That's where ports could play a big role. And also ports, in a way, are most of the ports are organized in such a way that they're not actually owning a lot of assets, which is a bit of a problem, because if you want to orchestrate something in an integral way, it's not that easy to make it happen. So playing that master of ceremony role, integrating role, is the other thing I would encourage ports to do so big time. Working with their clients, basically their local clients in the ports, but also the hinterland and of course the shipping companies.
You mentioned electrification, but then you also have these transition fuels, right? E-methanol, ammonia, LNG. You have, digitalization in order to become more effective and efficient. I mean, there is a lot that you can do to decarbonize.
Yeah.
By how would you prioritize here?
Yeah, so I already talked about electrification, which is obviously the first step to do. Then typically vessels need longer range, and especially seagoing vessels. That's where the other fuel types, other than power, come in, because basically batteries don't last long enough. So we're basically agnostic for what is the right solution there. And we're not saying there's going to be a silver bullet in all of this. So all those fuel types that you mentioned will play a role. At some point, it will be e-LNG, probably in the very near term, because there's a lot of experience there. It's quite easy to handle in a way. It can be implemented very fast. But at the end of the day, it will still contain fossil carbon atoms, or if it's e-LNG, it is still a carbon atom in there. But it will play a role. Then maybe on a longer run, ammonia. Ammonia definitely as a hydrogen derivative will play its role as well. But also it has its, let's call it side effects of NOx and other and safety-related elements. E-methanol will also play its role. So it's very much tailored to the situation at hand, the infrastructure around, the fuels available. And also, I think that's how it will play out. So there's no one solution, one size fits all. It's going to be a mixed bag of all of those. And that will make it, from our perspective as an investor company perspective, quite challenging to put the right bets. But in that sense, again, joining forces sometimes with competition through fund structures like we're offering makes a lot of sense there too, because you basically de-risk your portfolio by engaging on a couple of other options you wouldn't necessarily focus on from the onset.
You mentioned range, Shadi. Range of the sea glider, what are we talking about?
Yeah, the range of a sea glider is about 300 kilometers. So you can think about it like Abu Dhabi to Doha. So we can do that on on one charge. So in terms of ports, we have to charge it, and so we need the electric infrastructure. So many modern ports have that electric charging capability. Some ports do not. So, and again, just to be clear, we're an OEM, so we sell to operators, but we do help our operators in the ecosystem. So from all these discussions that we're having, the challenges is some locations might not have the charging infrastructure. And so that limits your range, because then you can only go half your range, because you have to, if you're going to, do that route, you have to be able to come back without charging. And so that's a big thing. And in many developing areas, they might not have that charging infrastructure, so that has to be built out to enable our technology to be able to connect and do these routes.
That brings us to the fact that many ports have to do huge investments, right? When, I mean, they have to electrify, they have to decarbonize, they have to prepare for, you know, the transition fuels and the alternative propulsion systems. How can they finance these infrastructure investments? Marco, any insights?
Yeah, at the end of the day, as I mentioned, ports typically, unfortunately, have a structure which is a bit of a scattered organization. So they typically maintain the ports, they do safety, they do all kinds of the utility type of stuff, but not necessarily holding the assets. So I think that's unavoidable. It has to be an integrated approach. It has to be large companies kind of clicking together. It has to be the shipping companies at the one hand. It has to be the fuel providers. It has to be the loading, unloading infrastructure components that all have to kind of collaborate in one go. And maybe one, you asked earlier about what is the quick wins maybe in the port approach. I would say still where you can gain a lot is by digitalization and data quality. I think there's still a lot of improvement, room for improvement in that area. So when you get better data quality, berth occupancy, that sort of things, and also on the routing side, which is not so much the port, but definitely there's so much to be done still in gaining efficiency. So that's short-term things, work on quality, work on standardization, benchmarking, having one standard that cuts across the various aspects of the value chain. I think that's where I would put my efforts initially.
And if you look at it from a global perspective, where do you see the most advanced infrastructure in ports?
So your question is like where you see good examples of where the ports are really running ahead of the game. I would say Singapore definitely is ahead. I think Port of Rotterdam is playing its part in this way. I think those really stand out in my view.
Shadi, from your interaction with ports, who are obviously also one of the potential point of origins and point of departures for your sea glider, how are these conversations? Are they open to new forms of maritime transportation? Are they more reluctant to include you already in their master planning going forward? Or
yeah, no, absolutely. They're very excited about that, and I wanted to mention something about the whole collaboration that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Is that you know, building out that charging infrastructure, the docking infrastructure to accommodate, let's say, our sea glider. That could be a big investment, and so to kind of like make that a little more accessible, you know, we're looking to work with other electric powered vehicles. So our vessel is optimized for long range, high speed, but there's other vessel you know, hydrofoiling crafts that are, you know, designed for, you know, short distances, higher payloads, and of course you have the eVTOLs. So the eVTOLs can go on land, obviously, and so we're having discussions with all of these players to co-locate kind of the charging infrastructure, so that you know, that whole mobility transition can occur at the ports. So, give you an example, like in UAE, you have Abu Dhabi and Ras Al Khaimah. So that's normally like a 3-hour drive. The sea glider can do it in under an hour. So we're looking at those ports, connecting them by a sea glider, and then maybe around the port, the slower but higher payload crafts can be feeders. They can feed into that port and we do the long distance, high speed, and then over there maybe you co-locate the eVTOLs that it can become very seamless. You know, you get off a sea glider, you jump out on a eVTOL, and you go inland to other points of attraction.
obviously, when you're planning your routes, right, and you talk to the different regions, where will your first routes be? I know you're Rhode Island based, but will your first operations also be in the US or elsewhere?
Yeah, so our launch customer will be in the US, maybe around Miami or in Hawaii. It's not been determined yet, but then probably in that same year we'll have our launch in the UAE. And when I say we, it's one of our operators. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And conversations in other parts of the region, who is following?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, NEOM is an investor in the company, and also they're looking to connect their coastlines and some of their islands. You know, Red Sea Global as well down the coastline. I have a feeling that that whole Red Sea coastline would be ideal for sea gliders. We're producing a 12-passenger sea glider, but the next generation is going to be a 100-passenger with about a 600-kilometer range. And so that sea glider can pretty much be like almost like a coastal metro, and you can connect the entire coastline with just investing in docking and electrification. No, massive infrastructure investment.
We're seeing autonomous trucking companies, innovative charging companies, pivoting their business model from public roads to ports, because this is where they can deploy already commercially, right? So making, again, ports real hubs of mobility innovation going forward. How can ports use this momentum to really position themselves as central nodes of innovation, Marco?
Yeah. Simple answer would be to embrace innovation in all its ways and aspects. I'm just making a connection. Yesterday, towards the back end of the afternoon, there was this session, which was Kearney's report on AI and its ramifications for our, let's say, topic here, the urban mobility. What I really picked up is that safety, sustainability, and decongestion basically all go hand in hand. So I would say the AI buzz and momentum is also for ports to be picked up and go in a grand way into this. And where I would see, let's say, the results of that would be to again do better routing, to make more efficient processes. So the less fuel you burn, basically that's a triple win basically on all aspects.
Yeah, you also see a lot of innovation hubs being built around ports now, right? You have accelerators by port operators, by port infrastructure owners. Is that something, Shadi, that you see that there's, I mean, we've seen that VC money is flowing into that sector. Yeah. Do you see heightened interest there as well?
Yeah, like I mentioned, where we're located in Rhode Island, the state has attracted a lot of maritime companies. And so in that same kind of complex where we're producing sea gliders, there's other small boats, remotely operated boats that are being produced. There's a lot of software companies that are working on data management for these vessels. So it's a really nice ecosystem that's being built. From some of the port conversations that we've been having, there's a big push on being able to provide, the data infrastructure. Just because in the future we see the ports operating almost like airports, and our vessels, when they dock, there's a lot of data to be offloaded, just like when an aircraft lands and comes to the terminal. And so, from what we've been from ports that we've been talking to, they're seeing that as coming down the line, and they're trying to be able to provide that infrastructure.
Can I just make an add-on comment on that? Because this is really talking about moving passengers, and that's very relevant for this crowd. But if you move goods, I just want to make the point that the bill of lading, which is a very old-fashioned, phenomena, that is still so much the mainstream way of dealing with data, basically, in shipping goods. And that's something where I think the world can benefit from moving to the next step. So.
With all the innovation taking place, what is the one startup or the one innovation that you see will change the ecosystem, or that you are particularly excited about, Shadi? Don't mention your own product.
Won't mention our own product, but like I mentioned, there's a company called Havoc in Rhode Island that's doing, like I said, those autonomous vessels that you send them out it's for military purposes, but you send them out and it's almost like a drone swarm. So what you've seen kind of in the future, what's happening in the air with drones, it's also happening on the water with autonomous vessels that can communicate with each other, share data, be remotely operated, can work on the edge with AI. So that's kind of an interesting space where I feel like the aviation sector is kind of leading that, and then now maritime is also following that as well.
Marco, same question to you.
Yeah, it's so many, but I mean, I can say REGENT would be a great example, but that's too small in its context. No, I would say I think wind-aided propulsion, for instance, in combination with the current classical, fossil combustion engines in vessels. Wind sailing has been around so many decades and ages, but still the combination of wind and IC combustion is a great way to go. It can add so much. So my point is that things that are around us already for a long time could be combined and made more efficient. So I'm more a firm believer of smaller steps into the future rather than earth-shocking kind of developments there.
With regard to the overall geopolitical environment, obviously there's also heightened interest in dual use. From your points of view, is that something that is driving this inflow of capital into the maritime sector? And how do you respond to that, Shadi, at REGENT?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of interest for our vessels to be used on the defense side as well. And there's been a big push in the last maybe 2-3 years with investment, government investment, and VCs now are more focused on this space that's been kind of neglected for many years. And yeah, so there's a lot of dollars flowing into maritime defense hardware, and that's just, and like I mentioned earlier, what's been happening with drones. There's been a lot of investment hardware in drones. That's also, the VC money is also flowing to maritime defense, and also there's a lot of support from the government, the U.S. government especially.
Yeah, if I again can build on that, I would say there's been a lot of effort on the VC front, early stage, seed, pre-seed kind of investments. I think what the world really needs, and this is just common across aviation and maritime, I would say, is exactly that sweet spot before you actually reach infrastructure kind of funding. That's really where it's a missing piece. And we as a company like to take risks. So basically this is about taking technology risk because you're not yet at the fully scaled, mature level of investments. And I think that's a sweet spot where I would encourage companies to come forward with their propositions, and then we're definitely there to look into that.
What was your main motivation to move into that maritime space? Because obviously we have quite large, product cycles. We have also very capital intensive investments many times. What was the motivation for you to go into that space?
So my personal drive is coming. I'm basically a 30-year-old. Or I've been more than 30 years in the petrochemical and oil and gas industry. So I'm coming from the fossil world. And if you look at the energy transition at large, this is one of the most challenging topics that came across over the many years. So I was kind of looking at the asset side, the molecule side, and I said, this has to be in a different way. It has to be supported from multiple angles. And that's where the investment side attracted me more than anything else, because that's the only way to get things across the finish line. Take risk, put money at stake, and start pioneering with this. And that's what really drove me in moving and making that step. Yep.
Shadi, since you know both worlds now, right, the aviation and the shipping world, what are the differences and where potentially can shipping learn from aviation?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, I spent 20 years in aviation. Then I saw this product, half boat, half plane, put together. Was very interested in it. Jumped into it. Found out that it's actually considered a vessel. So that's what took me into the maritime space. I'll be honest. From speaking to maritime stakeholders, the adoption cycle I think is a little bit longer than aviation, but I think that's changing. We meet a lot of maritime stakeholders, many different conferences, and I feel like it's accelerating. The technology adoption is starting to accelerate a little bit faster.
And how does it work that your sea glider is classified as a vessel and not as a plane, since it's flying?
Yeah, everybody asks that. Like, it's flying, it should be an aircraft, right? Yeah, so if you look at seaplanes, so when a seaplane goes up from the water and it takes off, and it goes to altitude, doesn't have an altitude restriction, it's considered an aircraft, right? So sea gliders, they take off, but we're restricted to about 10 meters above the water. So we don't go higher than 10 meters, And under the maritime regulation, that's considered a wing and ground effect vessel, a WIG. And there's already a classification for that under the maritime, that it's actually considered a vessel.
Is that a company that could be of interest to you?
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, yeah, it's a very new way of, and also a kind of a crossover between maritime and aviation. And also to just go back on your question, what can both industry segments learn from one another? Maybe the way I look at it, aviation is relatively a straightforward situation. There's not much option you got. And planes are relatively the same shape already for a long time. And by making changes there, it's going to be quite a long time before that actually happens. A lot of safety-related aspects dictate basically the pace at which it can go. Having said that, it's pretty straightforward as to how to make planes become more suitable for the future. It's basically focusing on alternatives that are synthetically produced, especially on the fuel side, and then can be dropped in basically in the same systems without making any adjustments. I think the maritime industry in that sense can be much more innovative than the aviation industry. So there's much more routes to actually get to the next steps. So I think from an innovation perspective, the airlines, the aerospace space has been very restricted in what it can do. Therefore, it becomes very innovative in a way. So I would encourage those people to cross over from one to the other and just see what happens. People at the end of the day make a big impact here.
100%. Obviously, the REGENT Sea Glider is battery electric. We previously mentioned the 55,000 large merchant vessels currently at sea. Which fuel will they use in the future in about 20 to 30 years, Marco, from your point of view?
I think the world has become addicted to fossil. Fossil, essentially, this is not a chemistry lesson, but it's hydrocarbon. And hydrocarbons produced in a different way is basically the most logical near-term steps that the industry can make. That's both for aviation as well as in shipping. So that's essentially creating renewable power, which is electricity, move it to hydrogen probably, and then a hydrogen plus carbon combination, which exactly mimics basically the fossil that is currently consumed in massive way. That is, I think, on the long run, so things for the aviation, in one word, that will be eSAF, and in the shipping industry, that will be E-versions of hydrocarbons, being it methanol, being it all kinds of other combinations of hydro and carbon.
What role could the sea gliders play in the overall, maritime logistics shipping sector? So not really the passenger transport side, but also the logistics side. And also, do you also test other propulsion systems, or are you focusing on battery electric first and foremost?
I'll start with the logistics side. So a couple weeks ago at the Dubai Air Show, we announced a partnership with DHL. Mm-hmm. So they're very interested in looking at potential routes, Middle East, Africa, that the Sea Glider can help with, where it can provide that high speed to areas that don't have high-speed connectivity, bypassing, challenging land infrastructure. So big potential there in the future to move goods into areas where that infrastructure doesn't exist, areas that are kind of remote. So there's a good potential there. In terms of propulsion, we're electric vehicle on the commercial side, but we are producing a hybrid version on the defense side, because defense requirements require much longer range and faster turnaround times. Mm-hmm. So we are producing two variants.
Thank you very much, and thank you also to you that you came on that journey to the blue side of the planet with us for the last 30 minutes. Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Shadi. If there's anyone out there with an interesting idea about how to innovate in maritime, please come and see Marco. If you want to learn more about the sea gliders, please meet Shadi. We're still going to be around for most of today, if I'm not mistaken. So thank you very much for your attention, and goodbye. Thank you.